Hey, well, good morning, everyone. Welcome. Like Becky said, my name is Andy. I'm a small group leader here at River City, along with my wife, Steph. I'm the tall one. She's the normal-sized one. This morning, I'm really excited to be digging into what's quickly become like one of my favorite stories, or kind of pair of stories in Scripture. So we've been preaching through the Gospel of Mark, looking at like the good news of who Jesus is and what he's done. And so we're going to be jumping back a chapter from last week into the back half of Mark 5. And in the previous two passages, we saw Jesus calm the raging sea. And in doing this, like he showed how he has power and authority over the laws of nature. And then in the previous passage, 2 weeks ago, we saw how Jesus cast out a bunch of demons out of this guy into a bunch of pigs, and like they ran off a cliff, and it was pretty sweet. And he was demonstrating like his power and authority over like the spiritual and the demonic. And so this morning, Mark has shown us that Jesus has power and authority over disease and illness and even death itself. So I'm excited to break down what's going on in the passage, and as I do, the main thing that we're going to see is that Jesus is our perfect healer. He's our perfect healer. So with that in mind, let's just pray quick, and then we'll dig into it. So yeah, Jesus, thank you for your word, and thanks that just like we can remember what you have done for us and what you've done for people 2,000 years ago. But just like pray that you would make that good news to our hearts this morning, and you just like you'd be the one who's like making much of your name here. So we love you, amen. All right, so I'm going to read the passage. We're going to be in Mark 5, starting in verse 21. It'll be on the screen. So when Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. And he pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." And so Jesus went with him. And a large crowd followed and pressed around him. And a woman who was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. And she had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and spent all she had, and yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. And when she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I'll be healed. And immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. And at once Jesus realized that power had gone out from him, and he turned around in the crowd and he asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people in the crowd against you," his disciples answered, "and yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. And then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." And while Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus and the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," they said. "Why bother the teacher anymore?" And overhearing what they said, Jesus told him, "Don't be afraid, just believe." He did not let anyone follow him except for Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. It's like that, just kind of like the inside disciple group. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. And he went in and said to them, "Why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. And after he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. And he took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." And immediately the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. And at this they were completely astonished. And he gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this and told them to give her something to eat. All right, so Jesus is our perfect healer. And so let's set the scene here. So Jesus, he's just returned from across the lake once again to this Jewish region of Galilee. And he's been here before a number of times, in and around the town of Capernaum. In Mark 1, we read that he was in this area. He says he was healing many who had various diseases, and he also drove out many demons. And then in the next chapter, in chapter 2, that was the story of him healing a paralyzed man that his friends had brought to him. So he's back here in Galilee. He has a reputation around here. And it's here that he encounters two very different people, both in desperate need of healing. And the first we meet here in verse 22 is a man named Jairus. And it says that Jairus is a synagogue leader. And so that wouldn't be like the same thing as like a rabbi or a pastor. Rather, it'd be like somebody who was in charge of like the synagogue operations. So like he's somebody who's taking care of like the physical building and like caring for like the scriptures there. So like they didn't have books back then. They just had these huge scrolls that they would keep in the synagogues. And so he was tasked with like keeping those things safe and protected. And so he was most likely wealthy because he was somebody who was chosen by the community. And so he was a highly respected Jewish leader and maybe even a Pharisee. We're not really sure. But what we do know is that he's come here to find the man who everyone has been talking about because his daughter is dying. It says he saw Jesus and he fell at his feet. And he pleads with him, "Come back to my house and save my little girl." Yeah. So this wasn't normal behavior in Galilee. They'll just like come up and fall at the feet of somebody. Like you didn't just do that to anybody. Like that was reserved only for like if you were making a really serious request of like a king or somebody really powerful. But he is absolutely desperate. Like to come and fall at the feet of a carpenter. Like that required real humility for him. So why is that significant? So what I want you to see is like when it comes to receiving Jesus' healing, there's always a cost. So I once spent a summer as a camp counselor, and one of my favorite things activities we did with like the middle school campers was this thing called the blind ropes course. So we just like weave a bunch of ropes around a bunch of trees and like posts and stumps and all these campers would be blindfolded beforehand. And their mission was to find the end of the rope. And the rules were you had to hang onto the rope at all times, and once they got to the end, they could take their blindfold off. But at any point, if they felt stuck, they could stop and raise a hand in the air and say, "Help." And that was the only word they were allowed to say. They weren't allowed to talk at all, which we had to remind them of a lot, right? And so one by one, like we'd add them to this course and watch as they tried to solve this puzzle, and to get to the end. And it was really fun just like watching a bunch of blindfolded middle school boys trying to figure this out, and we were rooting for them. But what we didn't tell them was there was no end. The whole web of ropes, it was all looped together. They also weren't aware that on their blindfolds was literally written in giant black letters, "Help," and they couldn't see it. See, the only way to win the game, the only way to beat the course was to stop and ask for help. So what we were rooting for was for them to realize, I can't do this. I need help. And it was only then that we would come over and we'd whisper in their ear that you could take off your blindfold, and then they would come and watch, silently with the rest of us. And some campers, they would start asking for help a few minutes in, 5-10 minutes, and there was others who would be on there for 40, 45 minutes, basically until we had to end it for the sake of time. They would have stayed on there for hours. And you might be asking, isn't this cruel? And no, it was formative. We were creating significant memories, and that's what camp is all about. But it raises the question, how long are you willing to go before you raise your hand? How long are you going to be ruled by your pride before you're willing to come and fall at Jesus' feet? And for Midwesterners, and I think especially for Midwestern men, but definitely not exclusively, I think sometimes the most offensive and costly thing about the gospel is that it requires us to admit that we aren't as independent as we'd like to think. See, it's only when we realize we can't fix our own hearts that we can really start to receive the healing that Jesus is offering. We have to come to grips with how desperate and hopeless we are without him. Yeah, in Jairus, he is there. He realizes he is desperate and hopeless. And it says that when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet and he pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." And so Jesus went with him. And it says that on the way, they're mobbed by this giant crowd of people who are trying to get to Jesus. And in the midst of that crowd, we read, is a woman who's been menstruating nonstop for 12 years. So this wasn't just something that would be medically concerning or, if nothing else, just hugely inconvenient and annoying. Because nonstop bleeding at this time, it means that she is stuck in a state of permanent ritual impurity. So Some of you just got into Leviticus in your Bible in a year plan, and man, you were just loving every page of Leviticus, I bet. It's a challenging book, but it's here in Leviticus that the Jewish people are given a set of purity laws, and this woman would have known them all too well. Because being unclean at this time, it meant that she wasn't allowed to be around other people. And if anyone came in contact with her, touched her or her clothes, or sat in a chair that she had sat in, they would be made unclean as well. And so being unclean, it usually lasted for about a week, and then you would wash, and you'd go to a priest, and he would make a sacrifice of atonement for you, and you'd be on your way. But for 12 years, she has been unclean all the time. And so here lies this stark contrast between these two people. You see, whereas Jairus is this revered leader in the synagogue, she isn't allowed anywhere near it. See, Jairus, he is a father and a husband and a friend to many, and she hasn't touched anyone for 12 years. And Jairus, he is a man who was chosen by his community, and for 12 years, she has suffered outside of town. And it says it's not for a lack of trying. In verse 26 here, it says, "For 12 years she has suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and spent all she had, and yet instead of getting better, she grew worse." Some of you are doctors or nurses in this room, and I just want you to know, this isn't Mark trying to take a shot at traditional medicine or something like that. Disease just wasn't very well understood back then. In first century Galilee, the dominant belief was that if you had a disease, the chief reasons for that would be either you sinned or your parents sinned, or that you just had a bad spirit. They didn't have, beakers. They didn't have pathology tests or that thing on WebMD that always says it might be lupus. You should see if it's lupus. She doesn't have any of that. And her horrifyingly short list of options, she has already run through it. And physically, socially, economically, she is at the end of her rope. And some of you know that feeling. You've been there. Maybe you're there right now, and maybe it's physical suffering. Maybe it's mental, maybe it's spiritual. You feel irreparably broken. You feel you're stuck in this cycle of frustration and isolation. And sometimes our sin does cause our suffering, but sometimes suffering is just what happens. It's just the hand you're dealt living in a fallen world. Where do you turn when you've exhausted all of your options? Yeah, for this woman, she had one last hope. In verse 28, it says, she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I'll be healed. That's an odd thing to believe. Does she think that Jesus is just this magic bug zapper who's going to take away her uncleanliness? Like I said, Jesus, he certainly has a reputation at this point, and in the rest of the Gospels, and even earlier in Mark, we've seen him come and lay hands on people to save them. In fact, that's what Jairus just asked Jesus to come to. He's come to my house, lay your hands on my daughter, and she'll be made well. See, but we haven't seen something like this described, where it's if I just touch his clothes, There's something really beautiful going on here. So let's jump again back into the Old Testament, this time to the very end, into the book of Malachi, the last book in the Old Testament, the very closing sentences of Malachi. These are the final prophetic words of God before 400 years of silence. We get this important promise. It says, but for you who revere my name, the Sun of Righteousness will rise with healing in its rays. This is a sad, sad book. And right here we get this tiny little glint of hope. And God is saying to his people, things are bad. You have doubted my love for you, and you have broken our covenant, and now you're entering the night. But the Son of Righteousness is coming, and he's going to make everything right. The sun will rise with healing in its rays. And some translations, it says wings, it'll rise with healing in its wings. And that Hebrew word there is kanaf. And literally it means wings or edge or hem. And so the same word in the book of Numbers we see, God commands all the Hebrew men to wear tassels on the kanaf of their robes. And this was the custom for centuries for Jews. This still would have been the custom of Jesus' time. This would have been how he would have dressed as well. And for centuries, the Jew, like many Jews, they understood this to be God's final promise of the Messiah to come, this verse. And many believe that the Messiah, when he came, like he would literally come with healing in the kanaf of his robes. And so this woman, she doesn't just believe that Jesus is powerful, like she knows that he's the Messiah. She just thinks, like, if I just touch the edge of his robe, of his clothes, like I can finally be clean. And she's right. Like we see one verse later, it says, immediately her bleeding stopped and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. Can you imagine her relief? It's like 12 years of suffering, and just like that, she's clean. The blood is gone. Yeah. But then Jesus, he does something that causes her to go from immediate relief to immense fear. The moment her bleeding stops, Jesus feels power go out from him, and he calls out, "Who touched me?" And the disciples, this seems like a really dumb question. Like, everyone's touching you. Who isn't touching you? Like, there's a million people here. They're confused. But he's not asking them. He's asking for the woman. And she is terrified. It says she's trembling with fear. See, like, she was clearly hoping to stay hidden. Like, her plan was to be healed and then to just kind of like sneak back into the shadows. See, she's an outsider. She's unclean. She's not supposed to be there, especially in a big group of people, like, especially trying to touch somebody. Like, this is borderline criminal. And she thinks Jesus is about to expose her shame. Why is he drawing her out? Like, why can't he just let this one go? Can't he just let her go? No, it says in verse 32, he says he kept looking around to see who had done it. Like, he is not dropping it, So far in Mark, the status quo of when Jesus heals somebody, it's like, Jesus heals you, and then you tell no one. But that's not the case here. Like, he isn't interested in keeping this one private. It says, so trembling with fear, she comes forward and she falls at Jesus' feet, just like Jairus. And she owns up to what she's done, and she's bracing for rebuke. Like, she's ready to be berated for her recklessness. Like, ready to be once again called unclean. Yeah, but instead, he calls her daughter. Isn't that beautiful? And it's the only time in the Gospels that Jesus calls anyone this. Calls her daughter. I love that, because up until this moment, the disciples, they thought this whole trip is about Jairus and going to save Jairus' daughter. And now here in front of everyone, Jesus is proclaiming that this woman is his daughter. Yeah, he is not interested in keeping that information a secret. Yeah, Tim Keller, he writes about this. He says, be aware that when you go to Jesus for help, you will both give to and get from him far more than you bargained for. Jesus, he doesn't just want to remove her uncleanness. He doesn't just want to heal her condition. He wants to remove her shame. Yeah, he wants to do so much more than she's bargained for. He's declaring publicly, this woman has not defiled him. He's saying, this woman belongs to me. Saying, daughter, you were an outsider, and now I'm bringing you inside. Daughter, you were a stranger living in the shadows, but now you're family. And verse 34, it says, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering. It wasn't magic clothes, It wasn't that she finally touched the magic thing that took her illness away. Her faith is what healed her. And what's more, that word healed or made well, that's the same word as the word saved. So what Jesus is doing here is he's not just, restoring her health or her purity. He is meeting her biggest need. Yes, he's changed her circumstances, but he's also giving her a completely new identity. Someone who has been declared pure and right for eternity as a daughter of God. Yeah, and this is just so beautiful. And we want to stay in this moment of beauty. And unfortunately, the very next verse, this moment is just ruined by, there's people from Jairus' house who come up and they're bearing the news that Jairus' daughter is dead. And like sometimes in the Bible, I think like tone isn't always super easy to translate or decipher, just like reading the words like from 2,000 years ago, but you can really feel the tension in this moment. Like if the point of this passage is that Jesus is our perfect healer, like how does it involve medical malpractice? Like he's let a little girl die while he was seemingly just like kind of distracted, like dealing with issues of purity and uncleanness. Yeah, I was talking to Phil about this passage. Phil's in our small group. He's a surgeon, and he was telling me about the rule of triage. And one of the elements of the rule of triage is that it says that chronic, stable conditions are always treated last. It's like if they aren't dying, they can wait. Yeah, and even assuming that like when it comes to like first century like medical ethics, we're probably playing like a little fast and loose here. Like this is just common sense. Like from a human perspective, Jesus has been negligent. You know, he should have moved faster. Like he should have prioritized these two cases differently. Like he shouldn't have stopped to deal with this woman who wasn't dying. And when people from Jairus' house, they ask, why bother the teacher anymore? Like they're insinuating that Jesus couldn't be bothered. Like they're insinuating like the reason his daughter died is because he just didn't care enough about her. Can you imagine how Jairus must be feeling at this moment? Like his worst fear has come true. Like his little girl is dead. Like I'm a father to two girls. Like I couldn't imagine the pain, like how shell-shocked he must have felt in that moment. Yeah, but I love this, that Jesus knows exactly what he's thinking and he's feeling. This is like a common theme throughout Mark. And yet he doesn't get defensive. He's not put off by Jairus' faltering faith. He's not put off by like the awkward tension of the moment or like this grade A, like passive aggressive hostility. Even when they start laughing at him, like he tells Jairus, don't be afraid, just believe. He's saying, your faith is not misguided. Like you came to me for healing, but I came for something so much bigger than that. Like I know this isn't how you planned it, but trust me. Yeah, and they get to Jairus' house, and inside there is once again a loud and emotional crowd. And I was reading like professional mourners were apparently like a thing for some reason back then, but like it seems like the immediate timing of all this, like it seems like these people were probably just like friends and families and neighbors of Jairus. So, and it's here that Jesus comes and he asks a second dumb question in this passage. He says, "Why is everyone so upset?" Which isn't, I don't know, that's an awful question to ask. He says like this child is not dead, but asleep. And they laughed at him. And to be clear about it, like every earthly definition, this girl is dead. Like this isn't just some big misunderstanding that they're all going to laugh about in a little bit. Like they were not good at medicine. That is very apparent. But like they could still tell the difference between death and sleep, right? See, but when he asks an obvious question, he's trying to make a point. But they aren't willing to hear it because they don't believe him. And so he does something interesting here. Now remember, like these people they're friends and family of Jairus. Like these people are associated with him, and by every Jewish cultural standard, like they would have been considered insiders. And like even literally, like they are inside of the house when he gets there. And then Jesus does something fun. He puts them outside. He reverses their position, just like he reversed the position of the bleeding woman earlier. Like he kicks them out of the house. Like he has power over the wind and the waves, but he has power to like kick your relatives out of your house, and that's great. Yeah, see, like they don't get the privilege of seeing what's about to come next. Verse 41, it says, he took her by the hand and he said to her, Talitha cum. I know it's not like what it looks like. I listen to a lot of YouTube. That's how it's pronounced, apparently. Yeah, for the second time today, though, like Jesus is doing something that would ordinarily make someone unclean. Like he takes the dead girl by the hand. And he speaks to her. And we get a translation within the translation here, which is, I don't know, it's kind of fun, like this little Easter egg. But so Jesus is speaking Aramaic here. It's a language that's actually still spoken today. But Mark includes this because he really seems to care about getting the exact words right that Jesus spoke here. And we get like a really literal translation of the Aramaic. But this isn't Jesus being like some sort of like sorcerer or magician who's saying like the perfect words to like, he's not like, I say to you, rise, girl, or whatever. Like, no, like Jesus is speaking to this little girl like a parent. Like Talitha is a term of endearment. It's like when I call my daughter love Or like when Steph calls me sweet face, like it's a term of endearment. He's taking her by the hand and he's saying, honey, it's time to get up. It's time to wake up. And just as that woman's bleeding stopped immediately, it says, immediately this girl stood up and began to walk around. And I love this detail that Mark adds at the end here. He says, and she was 12 years old. And like this bleeding woman, she has been suffering for as long as this little girl's been alive. And Mark like clearly is pointing out that this is not a coincidence, right? Like what he's doing is he's tying the stories of these two daughters together. He's inviting us as the reader to zoom out and look at what do these two stories have in common. Because in many ways, like Jairus and the bleeding woman, they're opposites, right? Like we've talked about that. But what they have in common is the cost. And so we talked about how Jesus required something from each of them. And that's true of us as well. Like some of us feel like insiders, right? And so the invitation for us is that we would surrender our pride like Jairus. And others of you, like you don't need convincing that you're an outsider. Yeah, but you need to surrender your shame. And to be clear, like we don't contribute anything to our salvation, but like for each of us who come to Jesus, there is a cost. Yeah, but the cost I'm talking about here is something else. So I want to circle back to verse 30, right in the middle of the passage here. The bleeding woman, she touches the edge of his robe, and it says, at once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. This is kind of like an awkward phrase, but what's going on here is like he feels like this sense of draining, like of weakness. See, like Jesus in this moment, like he pays a cost as well. Like he becomes weak so that she can become strong. Like he loses power so she can gain it. And so here, yeah, it's like momentary weakness, but the ultimate cost, that comes at the end of Mark. See, because in a little while, Jesus is going to bleed for this woman. In a little while, Jesus is going to die for this little girl. You see, it's at the cross that the price for both of these women is paid. Yeah, this is what Isaiah was talking about like 700 years earlier when he wrote that it is by his wounds that we are healed. Like in a couple of years, Jesus is going to be taken outside of town and crucified so that you might be brought inside. And like on the cross, like he is going to lose the hand of his Father so that you might know death as nothing more than a nap. And like he's going to be rejected and laughed at and declared unclean, like not just to forgive you of your sin, but like so that you might be made family. Yeah, so that you might be called a son or a daughter by God himself. Yeah, so in a few moments, the worship team is going to come back up and play 3 more songs, and then we're going to take communion together. And like, yeah, whether you feel like an insider or an outsider, like if you have fallen at Jesus' feet in faith, like then anytime during those 3 songs, you can go to either of the tables in the back and take communion. So we just dip the bread in the juice. But as you do, like, yeah, remember your healer. Like remember what he did for you on the cross, how he bled and how he died for you. Yeah, like how he's made you clean by being your atoning sacrifice. Yeah, and how he's done it all so that you might be family. And if you're still counting the cost of following him, like that is great. I think that's something everybody needs to do. And we're really glad you're here. But instead of taking communion, like talk to him about that. He's not looking for you to go through the motions, but he is also not interested in you staying on the outside. And so, like, ask him, like, talk to him, like, ask him to meet you in your suffering. Like, ask him to break through, whether it's pride or shame or, a combination of the two. Like, ask him to break through and not just clean you up. Ask him to bring you from death to life. Let's pray. Yeah, Jesus, like, thank you. Thank you that you are our perfect healer. And thank you that, you are not content to leave us on the outside. Yeah, thank you that at the cross you pay the price for these two women, and you pay the price for us as well. Yeah, so I just pray this morning that you would help us to count the cost of following you, and even more so than that, we would see the cost, the tremendous cost that you've already paid. So, yeah, we love you. Amen.